Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Why, hello there. Welcome back.
Good morning, guys. So I was just saying, Cindy, boy, I'm so excited. We got so much we want to talk about. We thank you, by the way. We watched the movie last night. So thank you, Julie, Daphne, and quite a few others that said, you got to watch this movie. So we watched this movie last night, and we're going to talk about it. Wow, it was a lot of fun, actually. At first I could barely watch it. It was just I just found it kind of repulsive and annoying at the same time. But then it did hook me because we do know that we are spoken to and given all sorts of clues by the controllers of this world, and whether they deny the control system or not, they always tell us things ahead of time.
Well, there were several things that they said in the movie that really touched a nerve with both of us. It's like, oh my gosh, they said what, and we've said what, for how long?
Yes, and so we want to thank again everybody over on Patreon. We couldn't do it without you guys. I do see more and more people are coming over to Patreon as obviously paid members, so then you do get to see every single video at one place with no commercials. And the exclusive ones as well, which come up every few days. And then also free members just choosing to bypass, all the other venues out there and watch directly on Patreon. So we do thank you guys for that. We've been talking about this time period that we are now in. And especially if I had to pick one year that it would be, to me, most likely to be the most important pivotal year in most of our lives, I think it's 2024. I really do. I think the world changes in 2024 more than any other world leading up to it, even more than what we saw with the plague upon the land. I really do think that 2024 is the one that, wow, everything just kind of well, it goes to an all new level. As you can see, we've been doing this a long time, 7 years. And here, going back 3 years ago, we're putting out the question, are we getting invaded? U.S. boats face Russian aggressors near Alaska. The scope of this invasion and its intention are truly staggering 8 months ago. And, all the train derailments, all the things that are going on, California's swarms at different times, but then the China fishing boat invasion. I do think that those fishing boats are a part of everything that's going on. It goes all the way back to the first one that we did. Speaking of these times, visions of the future, alien invasion, U.S. invaded by China and Russia. This says 5 years ago. It was actually January 1st of 2018 that one was published. So the movie that we're talking about is produced by Barack and Michelle, or if you prefer, it's Barry and Michael. Yeah, I guess whichever one you feel more comfortable with. It's by their company, Higher Ground. Seriously? Yeah. Higher Ground? Seriously? Yeah, and Julia Roberts is in it, as well as Ethan Hawke. And Julia Roberts, I barely could recognize her. I thought it was Madonna at first, or maybe it was Tawny Kitaen. For those of you that remember Tawny Kitaen, there's something that happens to Hollywood people that don't want to age, and they end up looking less and less human. There's this thing, that happens with all that work that they have done. And then as they age, they just kind of look less and less human. I think it's fine to age gracefully. I was hard watching her in this movie, honestly.
She is moving into a different state in her life where, the acting and everything is all on her. It's going to have to come within. But no, I agree with Mike. People in Hollywood, they spend an awful lot of time trying to stay young, and because of that, it does something to the skin that I don't see with most other people. And also, when we put on a lot of those things that keep our skin from wrinkling, those are those bad estrogens that you really do not want in your body, and that can make aging not so easy. So there's a whole lot of salesmen out there saying this will make you look younger, but really, when you turn that corner, it it has the opposite effect.
Absolutely. The system is banking on fear and ego, and that's what it does. It's all about stoking ego and controlling with fear. And yeah, it doesn't mean that they're not going to manifest or manufacture exactly what the movie's talking about. And this movie right here starts basically with this. As you see, there is a cyber attack, and spoiler alert, this is going to give you everything. We're going to cover kind of everything in the movie. So if you haven't seen it yet, you know, just be forewarned. So cyber attack across the country. At first, you don't know what's happening. They're trying to figure it out. Things are weird. Nature is acting weird. Everything is weird. And the movie starts basically with a couple in their apartment in the city, New York City, and she just spontaneously announces that she rented a house on Long Island to get out of the city and just, get them away from people, because she shares she hates people. Yeah, so it starts, this is the movie, Leave the World Behind, with a cyber attack. A lot of people have had really good thoughts on this. As we see this tweet here, Barack Obama heavily involved in pushing a movie about a technological blackout that no one could avoid, and a subsequent coup that pushed disinformation onto the people after taking control of said technology. Does that sound like a storm-like setting to you? Is Obama trying to get ahead of something? Are they literally telling us? He played a key role, obviously, in Netflix's latest Leave the World Behind movie, influenced the most critical parts of the film. Director of the film was directly asking for help from Hussein while shooting the film. Now take a wild guess what the movie's plot's about. It's about a technological blackout that nobody seems able to avoid after a coup happens. What's the angle here? Well, here's the plot. Amanda Sanford, a misanthrope, wakes one day and decides to take her family for an unplanned vacation. They have two kids, by the way, 16-year-old and 13-year-old. The 13-year-old to me looked more like she was 9. But then I'm just old, so it was, a very uncomfortable movie for a lot of it. I mean, it does create an air of tension, and it did build some drama. And of course, all of us that watch everything in this world going on, we're going to be really fine-tuned into this. For the average person, this might be so unfathomable and unlikely to happen that you wouldn't really be as pulled in as maybe somebody that kind of expects something like this to happen. And as the people that sent us emails, saying you got to watch this movie, it sounds like they're giving us little minutia details. Yeah, absolutely. So her husband Clay is a professor, and her two children Rose and Archie are tech obsessed. Once they reach the house, they have no cell connectivity. Rose, who's been binging on Friends, yes, and there is one key point in there too where they talk about Friends being an era or an age that never really existed.
Yes, a time and place that never really happened. It was more just like something that happened on TV that everyone watched, not that everyone lived. So that was a little bit curious. And then, as far as speaking to people who are asleep, which, this family that plays here, they went to the beach, and I was very curious how this huge oil tanker just comes up on the beach, and they're just trying to slough it off and ignore it and pretend that it didn't really mean anything, all the while where nobody has any phone service, and they're still, they're like, it's probably nothing. It just seems so typical of what we see out there, people who just refuse to wake up. They just don't want to. It's too hard.
Denial, yeah, and it's true. I think they were making a statement that most people will be in denial until the moment that their life is gone. They just won't be able to accept certain things, and yeah, I think that is true in so many cases. So once they reach the house, they have no cell connectivity. Rose, who's been binging on Friends, is unable to watch the last episode. That's all she's thinking about. That's all she's cared about. She's a little girl that's obsessed. She's got to find the last episode. I mean, many people have binged on things, and then can you imagine you can't see the last episode? Oh, yes, that's an irritant. Well, that's all she cares about. And as they relax at a nearby beach, an oil tanker runs ashore. And at the same time, she seems to be the only one, the little girl, that is kind of awake because she notices things that the others just don't notice. They're so head in their technology that they don't notice that anything is wrong, where people that weren't so into their technology would actually notice that there's something really weird going on. As first she's seeing the huge tanker, and then it's way offshore, but it's coming closer. She's just staring at it, and everybody else is doing their thing, heads buried in phones and laptops, iPads. And she says, it's getting closer. And then they look, and the father says, of course, that's nothing. Don't worry. And then it's getting real close, and the father is still like, I'm sure he's going to stop. And then the mother drags them out of there as it didn't stop, and it ran all the way up onto the beach. So now when they return home, because they wanted to go listen to the news, see what's going on in this crazy world, things seem very odd. Now, they realize that neither the television or the Wi-Fi is operable. He says that a political coup is afoot. Now, this is much later where that becomes obvious. So let's move forward here. This one here, Ultra MJ Truth, did a really good job going through all the details here. So this is his thoughts. Again, the film was executive produced by Barack Obama and Michelle Obama. Yeah, Barry and Michael did this. This film was about Cyberattack, but more than that, because it was about the fact that society in their mind will collapse upon itself and destroy itself, is basically what they're saying to us. And they've told us this in official reports throughout the years. But you have to really think about this. Why would and when did you ever see a former president and his husband, executive produce a film about a cyber attack on America by foreign hackers? I mean, as it says, it was filled with so many evil and occult symbols, made the head spin. There's a 666 in front of you with the times, and as you can see here, I mean, there's just so much, and the colors, and I found, me personally, I found the music and the vibe in the beginning, almost unbearable to watch. Kind of like a Quentin Tarantino film in the beginning. I mean, because he's going after that factor. Let's see. He's going for that shock factor. Well, they go after the shock factor too. This is interesting too, because don't forget that the WF has predicted a war game scenario called Cyber Polygon, which will occur before 2025. i.e. most likely during the 2024 election year. Now we have the next step in their lead up to the false flag attack in the form of predictive programming, a Netflix movie produced by Obama again. And, here it goes. The world collapse could be used as a cover for the coming economic collapse, maybe blamed on Iran, used to usher in the next stage of the Middle East war, as well as force the end of anonymity online, strengthen control of monitoring systems in general. All that and much, much more. All that and much, much more. Now, this is Master Student's breakdown. And the other thing that's really kind of creepy is the way they utilize deer. As we know, hunters prey on deer as a food source across the nation. Those out in the more out in the country, etc. It's a traditional thing, and in fact, we look to mythology and we see Herne the Hunter, which is, or Cernunnos as well. These are kind of humanized versions of a mythological man-beast that goes back to that time when we were so completely dependent on being able to take down a deer to literally survive for the tribe and all, quote unquote. Yeah, well, it gives you the impression that nature is going to fight back. It actually gives you the impression that nature might be being manipulated by frequencies and signals in order to attack humans, although it didn't really happen directly in the movie. And there is tension that goes on as Julia Roberts is intolerable in the movie, and so is the daughter of the man's house that they are renting. They're both like so type A and argumentative and directly in your face that they really grate on each other. And of course, towards the end, they kind of come together. But here you go. In 2023, America, we have gotten to a place where humans, where technology that we rely on so much, can we live without it, is the question. For many people, they go into withdrawal, not having it for a few hours, as it talks about the shutdowns, the lockdowns in 2020. And again, we were locked in our homes, but we still had our technology. Many people were locked in their homes, and they still had their technology, so they were okay. All that is also part of conditioning us to be okay, isolated, away from each other. In this movie, they're all isolated. You don't see large amounts of people. In fact, at one point in time, he goes off to explore and try to see if there's any neighbors around. And this is an area where it's people's second homes, so there isn't a lot of people there, as they made a point of saying it was the off season. And he encounters just one woman who speaks Spanish, who is panicked, and she is saying something about them dropping red something from the sky in an airplane, and then he ends up finding a drone that's dropping pamphlets all over. And at first in that scene, it was pretty tense because it gave you the impression that they were kind of crop spraying a poison or something. But he just up and leaves her, and she's begging for his help, but he doesn't speak Spanish, so he just leaves her high and dry and then feels guilty about it.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably stuck in that moral position that he has to go back to a place, and, does he bring back another person, or does he leave this person in the field? And I do believe he felt terrible about it, but in his mind, he had to make the decision to leave her behind. So you can see those moral struggles that people are going to go through. And, what do they tell themselves? With him, he just denied that it even happened. When they asked what happened, he never mentioned that part about leaving the Hispanic lady out in the fields all alone, because he couldn't, So this is really stretching the human psyche and, putting us in a position where we might have to make these decisions. And, do you choose to come open with them, out with them, or do you choose to just deny them and ignore them? But needless to say, it will happen.
Yeah, so the young daughter is in love with the way life appeared to be on the set of Friends in the 90s in a simpler time. And, I find myself looking back to the 80s all the time, and the 90s as well. But the 80s, being that I am of an older generation, it was a much simpler time. And then yet I clearly remember my mother lamenting my upbringing and, time of upbringing, and saying it wasn't as good as when she was young in the 40s. even though they were going through the war, she said it was the best of times. So it seems, perception-wise, that things have deteriorated one generation to the next, to the next, to the next. And, it's interesting to watch all this play out. So, again, they rent this mansion, and I don't know what it would cost, maybe $10 million, something like that, being that it's in Long Island, close to New York City. And because of the oddness and things that are going on, the actual owners want to retreat, because they also live in the city, to this house outside of the city. And at first it's really, really tense about, do we let them in? But they actually own the house, but we'll refund you the money. We'll refund you part of the money. First it's like, are these, potential murderers? Are they con men? What are they, doing? So at first there's that whole dynamic that's going on. And then the movie does get a little weird, because they end up bonding, and then they're actually kind of coupling off the two couples, which is really weird and twisted. But then that's the elites. They're weird and twisted as well. And again, you could go into the fact that, they're of different colors. Of course, they always want to throw those tensions in there, or, parent tensions. I really think, again, in other ages, when we're not manipulated by the system, we don't even notice that, because, again, when we're outside of this age, there will be interaction with a lot of beings that are much stranger looking than what we're used to. So, this again, it certainly draws you in. And none of these people are very, very likable when you get down to it. And I don't think that's really the point. Again, what are they trying to tell us? He puts down that Amanda's character is standoffish. She does not naturally like people. No, in fact, she can't stand people, but she does it for a living. And so, the gentleman that owns the house, GH, he is some sort of investment. He manages relationships. He's an investment guy. And so he has some very, very affluent clientele. And in fact, the whole story hinges on that. And that was kind of the part that wasn't so believable to me. It kind of felt really, really kind of fake, pulling out that he has this one contact in high military circles, high echelons, it's just so dang generic. It's like, who are you talking about? You would know if I mentioned the name, he says. That part of it felt very fake, as far as the movie goes. Because then he's giving you little bits and pieces. And here, this was interesting too. As you see, the ship's name is the White Lion, and in a different point in time, we see the numbers 1619 pop up. The White Lion in 1619 was the first official ship to bring African slaves over to the U.S. So the little symbolism there, White Lion in 1619. But yeah, you did have planes falling out of the sky. You had ships crashing. No television, no cell phones. At first, it's like a cyber attack. It's not like an EMP at first, at least from what we're given, because at first they don't venture out much at all. And then as they venture out, they discover more and more things, like bodies buried in the sand because the planes fell out of the sky. And that would be something that does happen with an EMP. Again, EMPs, the higher up in the atmosphere they're detonated, the more disruptive they will be. And of course, the power of the bomb is also a major factor. Smaller bombs, you're going to need more of them dispersed in many different areas. With a larger bomb, like if you're talking a Tsar Bomba, one could get most of the country, more than likely, from what I've studied. Electric cars, these are all Teslas. And so they were trying to get off Long Island to get back through because you have to go off of Long Island through New York to get to New Jersey. They were trying to go to family members in New Jersey, and they couldn't because all these Teslas were activated remotely and crashed on the bridge to trap people on in New York, and to not allow people to move freely. That was, I thought, that was an interesting part to bring up. I thought that was a good use of technology to show how, they've told us they could hijack our cars. All the cars are going to be equipped with kill switches if they aren't already equipped. You can have your car hacked and remote controlled remotely. Certainly the Teslas can. And I thought this was a big one. I thought this was a big give there.
Oh, definitely. This one was really, really huge because it spoke to the nature of how things were really done in advance, how the planning was pre-planned so well that obviously somebody hacked into these cars and gave them a pathway. They had maps, updated maps, and they had to have hacked in probably via Google and programmed these cars where to go because there's no one driving. Well, there has to be something navigating. There's got to be someone at some point putting in this data, putting in this information. So I thought that was like very, very real. And, it gives purpose to why do they want all of these driverless cars, besides to control or do something like this.
Oh, yeah. I thought that was, that was a good one that they included in there. Good from the standpoint of, I don't think a lot of people necessarily think about that. And you need to think about that. So again, for all the Tesla owners out there, or even newer cars, like we're not going to buy any more new cars, period.
No.
We've said our truck is our last vehicle like that. We'll be going to horses at some point in time or something else. Or camels, yeah, we'll see. But this, so they couldn't get off the island. They couldn't get into New York. But at the same time, those in New York couldn't escape either. Oh, and that they show why at the very end again. She's wearing a NASA shirt, the little girl, Ruth, never a straight answer. Very, very symbolic in the technology. And some of the times when they go out, like they did this one, I'm not sure if they're going to show you that. They show the satellites in space multiple times, but towards the end, they show a version of the moon landing like it was real, which we know it really wasn't real. But you're looking at from the perspective of the American flag planted on the moon, and you're looking at the Earth. And then the way that the sun is with the moon, with the Earth, it's like you get this ring of fire effect, and I think that they were telegraphing eclipse is what it felt to me, like they were telegraphing the eclipse. So we learn that America is under attack. The attack is through technology. Now, the red pamphlets that are dropped by a drone are in Arabic, and at least it looked like Arabic to me. And then the son says that means death to America. And he said the only reason I know it is because he played a video game in which that was in there. They couldn't read the rest of the message. They go to this prepper's house, and he says he knows there's somebody on the West Coast that got the same sort of message, but it was from either China or Korea. So, again, is it multiple countries? Because, multiple countries are going to be what's happening. But they try to put the twist in, too, that is that all just a ruse and an illusion, and it's actually happening from within. So there's also, as you see them covering their ears, there's sonic weaponry that's used that almost is ear piercing. It actually shatters windows, blows out all the glass.
Yeah, and this one really, really, really caught my attention because I've mentioned this before, but when I did get into sound healing and while I was learning, the person that I learned from, who was putting together a book on sound healing, realized that there was a lot of information missing when it came to sound healing. And a lot of books had been taken down due to a matter of national security. So that really, really, gosh, it jumped out at me so much. And then the idea that the military knows so much about sound. If you want to understand sound, our military knows all the ins and outs of it and how effective it is at healing, but also it shows in here how effective it is in really harming people as well, to the point where there's not much you can do, because there's something that happens to the young boy in there, Archie, that we were kind of confused on. We don't know if it happened from an insect bite or if it happened from the sound. I guess it could have been either, but he gets very, very sick, and they mentioned that it might be something because of that sonic sound. And really, how can you heal from that? You know, it's like the body's going to deteriorate, it's going to fall apart, it's going to fall into entropy. And what we do, what Mike and I do, is we bring syntropy, we bring the body together, but they have ways of making the body fall apart. It was scary.
And there was like a scene where he's walking through the woods and it's like some insect bit him, so you didn't know if that was the case, if it what it was, but he seemed to be the only one that was getting sick. And then at one point in time, his teeth start falling out, and the prepper neighbor says, you know, he's talking about radiological weapons. So, you know, again, there's a lot here, and this is the scene where he leaves the housekeeper and just ditches her because he can't understand her, and he panics. And then there's like tension between these two, and you know, it's kind of typical, a little bit like the birds. You're waiting for a bird's moment that never really happens, but the deer is interesting. So here he's saying, in Albert Hitchcock's classic film, The Birds, the bird invasion and birds coming together against humans was symbolic of a couple of things. Fear of communist invasion into America, the birds who are constantly hunted by humans now getting their revenge. Same thing with the deer. Nature may be striking back at humans, or perhaps technologies being used. Oh, here's the 1619 thing, 1619 Project, the White Lion. The White Lion was an English privateer operating under a Dutch letter of marque, which brought the first Africans to the English colony of Virginia in 1619, a year before the arrival of the Mayflower in New England. Now, the thing to realize, too, which I've realized through numerous different books and articles, is that, you know, what we might think of as... Well, if we encountered some of the native tribes that were already here before any African slaves were brought here, they would look just like people you would see in Ethiopia. So again, that was actually what was written, literally, in some of the first voyages by some of the first sailors. Fascinating. You know, I have a few books I've gotten on these old voyages where the sailors are just writing in their journals what they encountered. And it was interesting because when they went in the Carolinas and in Florida, the people, he wrote down that the people looked just like what we encountered in Ethiopia. They just looked like Ethiopians. And then when they were up above Virginia, when they encountered people in New Jersey and Delaware and Maryland, it was interesting to note because they looked more like people that we would usually think of as what we would call Native American Indians. Again, more of an Asiatic branch. But then in Maine, they encountered again another tribe that looked like they were from Africa. So, you know, our history is not, and we've talked about Califia, our history is not what it seems. Again, remember, they've told us all these things. All these things that are in this movie have been put out there in other, in reality. As you see, Energy Secretary says, adversaries have the capability of shutting down the U.S. power grid. This was back in 2021. Everything has been telegraphed. Everything has been telegraphed. These are the notes, Death to America. And you see the symbolism here, a serpent symbolism with venom spitting out, death to America, invasion, communist threats. And in this scene, he says one of the best scenes. I was kind of appreciating this scene because he takes Amanda. George takes Amanda into his private stash, and he did have a private alcohol stash, and yes, they are all luscious, but it was his vinyl stash that he wanted to share, and she gravitated not towards what he was going to pull out. George was going to pull out some classic jazz. Nope, she went towards the modern side of things, the music that his daughter liked, in vinyl form, though. And so then they dance, and then there's this tension that actually builds that doesn't feel even remotely legitimate, like there would be any tension. It was kind of ridiculous, really, but at the same time, I'm sure there's a point there.
Yeah, I mean, there is a point there, the vinyl pulling back things, these two being an older couple and so on. I mean, it was an okay scene. It didn't really do much for me, but it wasn't anything bad or boring either, so it was okay.
19.
Yeah, I don't know what this guy is about, but anyway, yes, there's a lot of things. I noticed this picture. We've gotten from the guides 5 parts. Now that could change. And I think still 5 is what we saw here. You see the country divided into 4 parts. There's all sorts of clues into it. As we've always said, I've always felt that they want to start a civil war before the Red Dawn. And that civil war may be it won't be concluded before the Red Dawn. The whole point of the Civil War is to enable the Red Dawn and to create the conditions that it could happen in a very smooth way. And then all of a sudden you might be getting flyers that are coming down saying you are part of, the new Pacific China company.
Yeah.
As Cindy said, we hope we would rather be in the Russian side than the China side. But, of course, we want to be free and be in nobody's side. And the way out of these things is to remove all these labels, because all they've done with countries is create an opportunity for chaos, war, and a perpetuation of the power structure. So Kevin Bacon plays Danny, and he's a survivalist. There's one scene right before everything goes to chaos where he's stocking up the bed of his pickup truck with everything you could possibly stock it up with. He knew what was coming. And then they go to him for help because George says, oh, Danny, he worked on my house. Yeah, he's the guy that did this great job. And Danny doesn't want to help them or have anything to do with them. He just says, that's not my problem. You're on your own. I took care of this stuff. I stocked up. I'm taking care of my family. He ends up taking $1,000 bribe to give a little medicine to the kid. But again, it shows how people will be divided, and even friends, again, can end up, being in adversarial positions when chaos really hits and the panic really does take over. The movie never goes into a super dark area. It's like they didn't want to turn it into a Tarantino film or something that was gross beyond all measure, thankfully. But at the same time, we were looking at it from a curiosity standpoint. Believability, it's fascinating to see what they want to get across to us. That's what's fascinating, is to see how they're portraying, how they want to get across to us what's coming, because they are obviously implanting the seeds that they're hoping that will manifest. But also, they're kind of saying, I feel like they're saying to us, this is coming. We're telling you it's coming, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it, trying to get us, frustrated and feel like there's truly no hope.
Mm-hmm. Well, over and over again, they kept showing where the characters were really in denial about actually facing what was truly happening until it was like right there in their face, and they're watching the destruction for themselves. And I think in some ways that can be dangerous, because you don't plan for anything. And if you don't plan for anything, and if you're not taking care of yourself, your emotional health is just as important as your physical health. I mean, you really need to be able to find your grounding and find your centering. And this is why Mike and I were always pushing that spiritual practice, because when everything does fall down around you, what are you going to have? You have to have something solid to stand on that is yours, and that is going to bring you back to center. And to me, that's the most important thing that anyone could do with this situation, aside from having some food stocked up. But if all you're going to do is stock up supplies, well, you're going to drive yourself crazy, because I don't think anyone can really prepare enough for something like this. Absolutely not. So it lies in the soul to be prepared.
Absolutely. It's all about the choices we make. So Ruth and Amanda finally put their differences aside, and this is making it a racial thing, and they become friends. Amanda saves Ruth from a massive deer attack. It seemed like that could happen. She was terrified, and there was hundreds of them coming. In other scenes, they show how Rose seems to be the only one that notices that something's wrong with nature. Nature's acting weird. This does also get into the fact that, Cyberattack's the first thing. It stops the mass communication. Then it seems like there must have been some sort of EMP-ish, at least, maybe localized EMP, and I think that's more likely the case instead of one that puts us all in the dark. I do think they'll take it down in pockets and use pockets of chaos. They talked about some sort of ecological disaster in the south caused by the cyber attack, but never really gave details on that. And animals were acting strange, and there was mass migrations of animals using radiation sound tactics to cause health issues to Americans, making them weaker. Absolutely, this is what's been going on right now for a while with the FIVEG. That is part of what's going on, and all the technology, the phones. I shared with you guys that arthritis was setting into my hands until I put down the smartphone. Haven't touched it. Arthritis is gone, completely gone. And it's technology. I was noticing, headaches from phones for years. So, and I wouldn't put them directly to my head, even having them 18 to 24 inches away. So this is why we have beaten up old 4G, and that's it. And full-blown military invasion does happen, and this is where it ends. She's just staring off into space, and it's like, what is she staring at? Well, what she's staring at is the bombs dropping on New York City, as New York City's being destroyed now from real attacks. And they cannot escape because their route has been blocked off. So it's like sitting ducks. It's Gaza. It's absolutely just like what's happening in Gaza. And there is another point in time when Danny the Prepper says, well, it could be Iranians, could be the North Koreans, could be the Chinese, could be anybody. We've made a lot of enemies. As it seems that, he was maybe a past military guy that paid attention. Absolutely. And in fact, it will be at probably more than a dozen nations. You could see it happening now. Part of what's happening with Gaza right now is to create that hatred. This is part of why we see everything going on right now. It's to create hatred towards really Israel and the U.S. So that the reprisal will be the utter, destruction of these entities as we know it. So this is how Babylon the Great comes to be. And the destruction of Babylon the Great. This is why, again, much better to get out of the cities in this time. I wouldn't be able to give a better recommendation than that. As you see here, hope begins in the dark. This was a painting up there. Hope, yeah. Again, everything that the dark side does, hope begins in the dark. This is a message from the dark side. The entire movie is a message from the dark side. But does it show us a reality? Well, again, look back to the Wayback Machine here at Deagle, and, what does it tell us? It tells us, as we look today, the United States of America, according to most population estimates I've seen, somewhere between 334 million people. And again, 333 adds up to 9. 9 is completion, 3 is divine. And then what's the population going to be in 2025? 99. 9 plus 9 is 18. 1 plus 8 is 9. That's completion. And so you're saying that we're going from 333 million people down to 99 million people in now a year. A year. What could possibly happen to cause that type of mass migration? Because originally they were talking about mass migration due to economic reasons. This is the FBI. This is the CIA. This is the DOD. This website is all those. This is where they pull their information from. And it's not just, again, the U.S., as we see population decline in many places, but it's mostly, and as I say that, Skype turns on the other computer again, because they don't like us going and showing how this is their hand. They've told us. They've told us exactly what they are planning to do. Iran's going to lose 4% of their population in the coming war, and the U.S. 70% of the population. And these numbers, I gotta say, they feel like they've changed, even though this is the Wayback Machine. Down 3% Russia. I feel like they're updating these. It's curious. The UK goes down to 15 million from 67 million. Australia loses 40% of its people. Venezuela's population actually goes up. We've covered all this so many times. By the way, they do have this out. This is from Deagle.com. This is a ranking, a power ranking, so to speak. In 2022, China's number one. Wealth, 1,000. So China's the wealthiest nation in the world. Strength militarily, 1,000 Russia. And wow, that's interesting, is it not? And you have the U.S. ranked number 2, wealth 562, strength 904, population 333 million. And there's India. So isn't that curious? It is very curious to me. By the way, it's coming. President Biden warns of evolving Russian cyber threat to U.S. This is again from 2022, all right in front of our face. This is from 2015, an expert saying an EMP or geomagnetic disturbance, 90% of the U.S. population could die if one of these big events happened. And again, in 2019, there was a big report to Congress that came out saying the same thing. 90% of the population could die because of this, because society will collapse.
Mm-hmm. The other thing, and I forgot exactly how they mentioned it. I don't know if we already talked about it, but the rituals with the solar, with the December thing. I'm a little lost of words.
Yeah, when George is telling, when George is giving, yeah, he's giving how he knows insights, from one of his clients, his most wealthy client, whom you all would know his name. I don't know if it's Gil Bates or who it's supposed to be, somebody. Maybe it's supposed to be Klaus. Who knows? Somebody on a big level. He made mention of when the elites get together at their winter meeting on the winter solstice. Their dark, secret cabal meetings on the winter solstice. Interesting, too. Is it Matthew? I think talks about all the destruction and tribulation period, and it says pray your flight is not in the winter. Of course, a lot of the a lot of, when you look to the book of Revelations, if you really look closely, it is talking about events in the past. It's talking about the Roman Empire. Caesar Nero, Caesar Neron comes out to 666. I mean, I knew that as like a 12-year-old. It was stuff that was being talked about way back in those days, in the 80s and even in the 70s, how the book of Revelation was really about that period in time. But it's written in such a way that we can adapt it to our time because, again, we're always living in the tribulation. This is what they do. They run through these cycles so that we are always in the end days. We are always in the tribulation.
And then the other thing before we move on from the movie, I remembered when they were having that conversation, the other thing that stuck out to me so much was there's really the idea that there's really no one who's pulling the strings behind the scenes. I mean, the best you can do is create a bunker or a safe place for yourself because there's no one human involvement or one face that there's any control over. So, that just told me, well, of course you're not going to find any humans in control of this because it's being directed above that.
Yeah. And this is that scene. So she says, are you thinking that your friend is somehow behind what's happening here? And he says, a conspiracy theory about shadowy group of people running the world is far too lazy of an explanation. And then he says, especially when the truth is much scarier, what's the truth? No one is control. Now, no one is in control. So what hit me and Cindy was immediately, we took it a different way. Instead of saying, when he says no one is in control, I immediately took it to be AI. Immediately, like no people are in control. No one is pulling the strings. That he says also, sure, there are those like my friend who might have the right kind of access to the right kind of information. But when events like this happen in the world, the best, even the most powerful people can hope for is a heads up. So, to me, I immediately took it as AI, and I think Cindy was getting more like the control is off-world.
Definitely control is off-world and AI working together, really.
Yeah, because ultimately the AI is what controls the Anunnaki and the Draco. So, again, that part really struck me in that I felt that you can take that like, well, all is chaos and anything could happen, but no. It's organized chaos. It's structured chaos, and we are told what's going to happen. The elites are told what's going to happen from somewhere else.
Well, it's so screaming in our face every day on the dollar bill. Order out of chaos.
Yeah, order out of chaos, and the all-seeing eye that's watching everything on planet Earth that's not from Earth.
Exactly, yes.
I mean, it couldn't be any more plain and simple than that. So, this is what this is really what's going on. See, this is the ship coming in. The White Lion coming to bring slavery, yes, and the enslavement of the American people. I don't know. I thought, to me, the only actor that did a good job was George, really. But hey, that's just me. I thought Julia Roberts was horrible. It's just, I don't know.
I think she's looking for her groove.
Yeah. But, I know these areas so well. I know those views so well, having grown up in Connecticut, spent 40 years of my life in Connecticut, been through New York City so many times. Long Island wouldn't be a good place to be, but again, no city is going to be a good place to be. No one is pulling the strings. Heads up. How do you get a heads up on a random series of events. The only way you get a heads up on a random series of events is if they're not random.
What I find, what kind of bothers me sometimes is it's just my personal thing, but I hear a lot of people say, oh, my military contact that's really high up, they say that something's going to happen like next week. And I've heard that like every week for the last 2 years from certain channels. And that, and it really puts people in such a scary place. So I don't ever want to be that. But if I do know something, I'm going to tell it like it is, and I think, to be fair, that's what people are trying to do. But we just hear far too much that my military contact, has information and then nothing happens. And I think in a way that almost gets people deadened to the time that's very real, that is upcoming. I mean, when it's time. It's like having a baby. You're not going to stop it. It's coming, when we reach that time. So it's just something to think about, how to get into your spiritual practice, because if you have that practice, it doesn't matter whose military contact says what, you're going to be on your solid ground. Keep a thought on that bird who lands on the branch. And if the branch falls, the bird is fine, because the bird can fall back on itself. It knows its wings can hold it.
Yeah, again, there's so much in movies that have been telegraphing things. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, obviously The Matrix, obviously so many other movies that we have seen are telegraphing it. So the movie ends with the little daughter goes missing, and she ends up finding the house that the neighbor says, make your way to the Thorn house. I outfitted, or I know a guy outfitted this place with a bunker, probably has tons of food, et cetera, you'd be able to ride out the storm. And so when Rose gets there, she finds a huge VHS collection, or DVD collection, and goes ahead and watches the ending of Friends, and that's basically where it ends. But we do see tons of food and everything you would need in this amazing bunker of a house that would cost tens and tens of millions. So the parents were on their way to try to find the house too, so we can only assume that they all got there and made it through the storm, or whatever we want to assume. The thing I noticed, though, it had like Aunt Jemima's syrup by the gallon. It had all sorts of food that are going to just quicken your death. That's the type of thing that sticks out to me. Look at this, Aunt Jemima syrup, Domino sugar. All loaded with toxins, cream of wheat. I mean, these are foods that, honestly, we wouldn't eat. If they were up on the shelf, we wouldn't eat them. We wouldn't touch them. We'd be scavenging for something else naturally. Again, if you're stocked up with all these other long-term survival foods, look at the labels. If it's loaded with artificial flavors, if it's loaded with sugar, and you get hit with radiological weapons, your immune system's going to crash. You ain't going to last long.
I mean, it's not that I won't eat it because I feel that I'm better than. I know that if I eat it, I'm going to be in a lot of pain. Like, my body cannot handle the GMO. And even if you're not in pain, understand that it is starting to weaken you if you do eat it. So, I mean, sometimes I get it. People get hungry, but no matter how hungry I was, I'll go forage something. I cannot eat this stuff because my body it refuses it. It rejects it, and I'll be in pain for 3 days, and it's just not worth it.
No, I mean, spam by the case. Come on.
No.
So, guys, look forward to your comments. Share with us what you see in this movie, and can't wait to hear those comments. As always, thanks for your support. We welcome you over on Patreon. Source bless. Namaste.
Namaste.